awesome man of God that you have brought to speak to us, Lord. And we thank you for what he is to each one of us, God, and how special he is to you. And I pray that you will just bring your spirit and your power through him tonight as he preaches. Help him to remain calm. Help him to just feel your peace over him, and help us to just hear your word and hear your thoughts that you have for each one of us, God. He is a special man, and I thank you for him in my life. And I know that he is a big part of all of our lives here. That you'll just bless him and help him to preach a great sermon. In Jesus' name,
amen.
You recording, Andre?
I've been recording.
We are?
Yeah.
Good. Come on. All right. All right. Hi, everybody. How are we doing tonight?
Good.
Fabulous.
Awesome. So, first of all, I just want to say thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to be able to share and stand up in front of you. So, what I'm going to school for, I get super nervous guest speaking, so this is going to be good practice, and I'm really excited. So, to give you a little background on who I am, I've been a follower of Jesus Christ for a little under 3 years now. So, not that long. July 2011 is when I gave my life to the Lord. The amazing thing is, I'm about to finish my second year at Life Bible College. I never thought I would be where I am today, and that's just awesome, and I'm so thankful for God for that, for getting me as far as He's gotten me. Excuse me. But today I want to be talking about how to be an example to other believers. And this last school year, it's kind of funny. Now, every time I look back on it, I'm like, wow, I've been given some great opportunities on how to be an example to people at my school, particularly to roommates. Now you're saying, wait, the school year is not over. How have you gone through 2 roommates? Well, the first one was a slightly older gentleman, and he really valued quiet hour. And what that was is at 10 p.m., it's supposed to be quiet hour at school. No one's supposed to be loud. No one's supposed to make noise. Let's be honest, we're out of college. We're not going to be quiet. That's just how it is. And there's I have a particular quad mate. So in our quads, we have 4 rooms to a quad, 2 people to a room. And I have a particular quad mate who would come in between the hours of 12 and 2 and just fling the door open so it'd be like thud against the door, just a loud thud. And our room was right by the entrance. And so my roommate would be like, oh, there's so-and-so again. And I'm like, yep, you can hear him, because he'd be like, oh, stop. This is how he walks, literally. And so my roommate would get so mad. And I'm like, dude, calm down. It's okay. Just go back to bed. Do your homework. Put your headphones in. Do something. And he would get so furious. And it got to the point where he even, sorry, I laugh because I find it very amusing. He slammed his laptop closed, said, I can't bleep and take this, and stormed out of the quad. And I was like, all right, well, I guess I'll turn off the lights since he's gone. I'm not doing homework anymore and go to bed. And so the next day I was like, hey, Tim, can we talk? Oh, whoops, I name dropped. Sorry, bud. He's in my class, so I hope he doesn't see this part. I can shoot the 5 minutes, so I just won't shoot this part. I was like, hey, dude, can we talk? And he's like, what's going on? I'm like, listen, the way you stormed out of the room and, the way you get angry, I feel like I'm walking on eggshells around you. I'm like, that's not healthy. I was like, and the quad, yeah, they give you a hard time, but maybe there's a better way we can go about this. So I tried to be an example and just show him how to properly handle the situation. Well, needless to say, things didn't work out. Our quad just isn't quiet ever. We're probably one of the loudest quads on campus. So he moved out. Second semester comes, and this guy, fresh out of high school, second semester of college, never lived on his own, never been out of his parents' house. At first, I was like, dang it, I really wanted my own room. I could totally just watch Netflix whenever I want, do whatever I want. I don't have to worry about living with someone. This is rad. He comes, and I'm like, okay, you know what? I can speak into this guy's life. He's young. Maybe he needs a good example. Well, this guy literally, defines slob. And I mean, I say that, but I don't mean it in a bad way. Some people just are messy. And if you looked at slob in the dictionary, you'd probably see a picture of our dorm room. I mean, just picture protein everywhere. The powder just everywhere. Imagine, a bag of chips. You crumble it, dump it all over the floor. And then you have to step over wet clothes to get to your closet. I mean, it was a mess. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to clean up for him. I'm going to be that example. That didn't last very long, let's just say that. I went through the proper procedure, and eventually, unfortunately, he moved out of my room. But I found myself being a good example in the beginning of the semester, but when it came to a harder situation, when God said, okay, I'm going to test you even more, I failed miserably. I wasn't a good example to that kid, and I continued to pray for him and try to be a better example and learn from that so in the coming situations I can be. But so today, I'm going to be focusing on how to be a good example to others. And the verse I'm going to be using today is 1 Timothy 4:12. So let's go ahead and open up our Bibles to 1 Timothy 4:12, and we'll go ahead and read that. So 1 Timothy 4:12 says, "Let no one despise you for your youth, but set the believers an example in speech, conduct, love, and faith, and purity." This verse has been something that's been on my heart for a couple of months, and I've been trying to just process it and just study it and make it applicable to my life. So, to give some background context to this verse, Paul and Timothy went to the city of Ephesus, and there's a church there. And Paul was just like, pretty much, hey, Timothy, like, I trust you, you're my main man, like, I'm leaving you here. Fix the problems. Fix what's going on. What was going on in Ephesus at the time was there was two men who were spreading false doctrine. They were teaching God's law, but not understanding how to teach it. And Timothy, as I said, was, because of his age, he was probably a little timid, he was nervous, he was scared. When they say youthfulness in this verse, Timothy was actually between his 20s and 30s, according to most commentaries you look at. So he's right in our age, so he's not that young. But it said that most people in this town, and the people that are spreading the doctrine, were around their 60s. So he's like, I'm picturing Timothy in this situation, and I'm probably like, I'm scared, like, I'm so young, these guys have so much more wisdom than me. They know the Bible way better than me, they know doctrine way better than me. I don't want to do this. And Paul's like, no, dude, you're gonna do it. Like, I trust you, you got this. Just be an example. So, and so this is first written. So in the first chapter, we see that Paul is addressing Timothy with a false doctrine, and then in chapter 4, he addresses Timothy again and says, "But do not listen to these false teachers. Do not listen to these leaders. Instead, set the example for your fellow Christians." So what I want to focus on in this verse, though, are the examples that Paul addressed Timothy to be, and these examples were in our speech, our conduct, our love, our faith, and our purity. What I found really interesting was the word example. It comes from the Greek word typos, and the context is being used is of being a pattern or an example for others to follow. So what I've drawn from that is that this passage is not only telling us to be an example in each one of these areas, but taken together, they are comprehensive enough to constitute an appropriate example. So don't be an example in just these 4 areas, but be such a good example in all 4 of those areas that it constitutes an example someone wants to follow. So your lifestyle turns into a lifestyle that others want to replicate. That's what I feel Paul is telling Timothy in this. Now, when I was reading it over, I'm like, well, who should be these examples? Well, the verse says Timothy, but I feel we can apply that to us. And those who should be examples are those who the ministers of the gospel, preachers, teachers, evangelists. They should all set a good example for others. They should provide an example worth following. Those aren't the only ones that should just be examples, though. Everyday Christians, faithful Christians, should also be examples. Doesn't matter how old you are. If you're 5, if you're 95, if you've been a believer for 6 months, if you've been a believer for 60 years. We should all be examples to everybody. Christian context, non-Christian context. We should all be examples. So, the first example that we should be is an example in our speech. Now, this is one, personally, that I struggle with a lot. Whether we are in private conversations, one-on-one, with our significant other, professors, parents, bosses, coworkers, whoever it may be, our children, whatever the example is, we should be an example in our speech. We should set an example of speaking with truth and grace. And this even applies when we're not sharing God's word. We should be able to example in our speech to others. So, for example, we all have Facebook or Instagram, right? I mean, most people have social media now. And sometimes we'll type stuff on our statuses and not realize that our language, even though we're not speaking it, we're still typing it, it might not be appropriate. I have a lot of non-believers on my Facebook list. That doesn't bug me. They're my friends. I love them to death. I pray for them every day. But I have to be careful with what I put on my Facebook. Because if I put something, I'm setting an example for them of what it means to be a Christian, and it might not be a good one. Because of the language I'm using, the context I'm using, what I'm saying. Another example of this would be, so let's go back to my roommate situation. The 18-year-old, the young one, when I would vent, and when I look back on it, I was not setting a good example to my fellow believers because of some of the things I was saying. Yes, I was venting, and I wasn't trying to degrade the person, but I wasn't doing it appropriately. I should have just gone to my resident advisor rather than going to my friends, because now I'm putting a bad image in their head of who he is. And that's not a good example of how to use our language. Ephesians 4:29 says that, "Let no corrupt talking come out of our mouths, but only such as is good for building up as it fits the occasion, and that it might give grace to those who hear." So being an example in our speech is something that I feel a lot of people, we tend to just graze over and not really think about. It's just because it's second nature. It just comes natural. What we say is natural. What we watch, what we hear comes out of our mouths. So when we're like listening to secular music, they could say stuff that we just say because it's just being ingrained into our minds and into our lives by the world around us. As Christians, though, I feel like we really need to watch what we say in our speech and be the best example possible. We need to use appropriate words and building people up rather than knocking them down. Our vocabulary should be free of swearing, cursing, filth that permeates the hearts and minds of the unsaved. So even when we're talking to our Christian friends or our future Christian friends, we should watch exactly what we're saying. We should be sure that the content of our speech is wholesome and edifying. And I want to actually go to a person in the Bible who provides us with a great example of someone who chose their words carefully and spoke the truth. And this is in 1 Samuel 3. We read that a young man who God specifically used to be his spokesman to the nation of Israel was used by God. And in verse 19 it says, God's word says, "Samuel grew and the Lord was with him, and he did not let none of his words fall to the ground." Samuel gained favor in the eyes of God and of men because he served the Lord and plainly spoke the very words God had given him to speak. Excuse me. Had Samuel ruined his testimony through filthy language, slanderous gossip, or unintelligible speech, this young man would not have been able to be used to magnify the work of the Lord and wouldn't be used for the glory of the Lord. Excuse me, I'm thirsty. Next, we see that Paul addresses the issue of, says that we should be an example in conduct. And in the Greek, this word means manner of life and behavior. Depending on the version you use, and I believe it's NIV, conduct is replaced with life. So be an example in your life. So when we're being examples of conduct, we should demonstrate humility and wisdom. James 13:3 says, "Who is wise and understanding among you? By his good conduct, let him show his works in the meekness of wisdom." So when we're living out our life and we're wanting to be a Christian example, we need to live holy lives. We need to be examples of holiness, of respect. We need to live out our purpose in those ways. Our conduct should be example to believers and honorable to those who are not believers. So the lives we live, people should be pleased, be satisfied, be honored by it. Like, wow, this person is just so genuine. They're so nice. He or she it never gets angry with me. They always have the appropriate things to say. That's just how it should be. But this is something I feel we can waver because, let's be honest, when we get comfortable with people, when we first meet someone, we have a wall, and we keep that wall up. But when we get comfortable, that wall starts to come farther and farther and farther down. We start to live our life and exemplify our life in our real manner rather than hiding it. We tend to put these walls up, and then when we get comfortable, it's like, oh, I'm going to be super polite and not really be sarcastic, not really joke. Oh, now I'm comfortable with the guys. Oh, man, I'm going to start telling jokes that I think are funny, and they might be inappropriate. So it's not a good lifestyle, a good example of a lifestyle to live. And I actually failed in this miserably last night. So as I was kind of just going through and prepping what else I wanted to say, I'm sitting on the couch and I'm like in the zone. Like nothing distracting, no headphones. I'm just like typing stuff up. I'm like, yeah, I got this. And one of my classmates goes, bink, right in my ear. And I'm just like, ouch, you jerk, what's your problem? Like, can't you see me doing homework? And I just like totally flipped out. And I was like, oh, my bad, bro. Sorry, love you. Like, I'm just stressed out. That wasn't a good example of my conduct because I overreacted and I got mad rather than saying, hey, dude, that hurt. Like, come on, don't do that. It's not nice. Like and this goes back to words. My words were not nice. They weren't edifying. So I failed, and I was like, dang, that's gonna be good. I'm gonna have that tomorrow. So let's see. So there's someone in the Bible by the name of Daniel, and him and his friends were, despite their situation, they still remained true to their God, and they were captive and subject to pagan beliefs and practices. They were strangers in a foreign land who found themselves separated from their families and friends. They had every opportunity to enjoy the sinful nature, the worldly attractions, and entertainment that the pagans practiced in Babylon. There were no godly adults, no examples besides those four to tell them what to do or what not to do. Yet they refused to defile themselves with pleasures, the foods, or the amusements of the pagan Babylonian lifestyle. Why? I think it's because their convictions were their own. Other young Israelites that were taken captive as well gave into the pressures and conformed to the Babylonian ways. But Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did what was right because they're young, or because they were young people with personal convictions. So God's convicting them not to do these things. And they got rewarded from their separation of the world. Their behavior and lifestyle remained exemplary throughout the captivity. So that's a good example. We need to remember that. How I kind of like, what I pictured in my life for like a worldly example to say would be maybe being gated in downtown Huntington during 4th of July or the U.S. Open when there are people doing things they shouldn't be doing. Underage drinking, people are smoking, people are getting drunk, people are dancing inappropriately, dressing inappropriately. And we're just trapped there. We can't leave. But the four of us stick together and we live out our lifestyle as the word tells us still, and we are examples to each other. That's what helped me kind of like put this into perspective. Like getting thrown into a situation that's not fun, that's not edifying, that's not pleasant, but you and your friends still came out on top and were still used by God to bless others and just lived out that Christian example and did not stumble. So next, Timothy says to be an example and love. And the Greek word for love in this context is agape. There's two different Greek words for love. And this one means affection, goodwill, and benevolence. So based on what this means, I feel that the love we are to display is to be manifested toward God, our colleagues, and our enemies. And in the book of Matthew, Jesus tells us to not only love our God with all our heart, soul, and mind, but he says we should love our enemies, bless those who curse us, do good to those who hurt us. Man, that's a hard one to process. And pray for those who spite us and persecute us. And 1 John 4:11 tells us that if God so loved us, we should love one another. Now, let's go back to my 18-year-old roommate situation. I thought that when he moved out, we were kind of on okay terms. But one day, while I was just talking to one of my fellow quad mates, He's like, hey, dude, so-and-so said this, this, and this about you today. And what he said was degrading, hurtful, and disrespectful, and it actually put my character in question. Now, my first fleshly instinct I want to do is I was like, dude, I'm going to go call this kid out right now. Like, I'm going to, like, squash it. I'm just going to handle it. And I was like, wait, no. This kid's bigger than me. This kid's stronger than me. This kid has anger issues. So if I try to confront him, I might get beat up. So instead, I dropped it. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to pray for him. I'm going to show my love and affection for him and still treat him as if I don't know what he said, because I want to be a good example. I want to move on. I don't want to hold this grudge because he questioned my character. I realized that most people at my school know my character. So I'm like, even though he's questioning it, people were defending me. And I was like, okay, I'm being a good example, at least in one area of my life, so people are defending me. So I'm just going to leave it as is and drop it. And that was extremely hard for me. I mean, I knew exactly where his room was. I wanted to just confront him so bad. But I didn't. I decided to just love on the kid and be an example of love. Now, next, Paul says to be an example in our faith. And the Greek word for this is, I'm probably going to butcher this really bad, but I think it's pistis, maybe? Am I close enough, Jim?
Yeah, but I'm not going to repeat that word.
It's P-I-S-T-I-S. So.
That's pretty close.
Okay, and its meaning is assurance, belief, faith, and fidelity. Being an example of faith can either refer to the belief one has, or to the loyalty or faithfulness to one's character, or even someone else. Hebrews 11:6 shows us that Christians should possess a strong belief or faith in God. In every moment of our lives, whether good or bad, we need to be faithful in those situations. If your friend's going through a hard time, we need to help build up their faith. And this goes back to being examples in love and in our words. We need to speak words that edify them and love on them and build them up. And even tell examples or stories of when you had a hard time and when you still trusted and had faith in God, He came through. So we need to be an example in our faith. And a Bible character that's a really good example of this is Gideon. He remained faithful to God despite his circumstances. He is listed in Hebrews 11, which is known as the faith chapter, as a young man who, out of weakness, was made strong because he followed God's orders even when they seemed unreasonable by man's standards. I don't know about you, but sometimes God said, do something, and when I've told friends, or even non-Christian friends, like, you're stupid. Are you crazy? Like, literally, even as sad as it is, even my family was like, do you really want to do what this is doing? Do you really want to go to Bible college? Do you really want to go to ministry? You know you're only going to make like $5,000 a year, right? And I was like, I can be the next Billy Graham. Don't speak that into my life. Like, stop that. I can make $100,000 a year. You never know. So, as ridiculous as it sounds, we just need to be faithful. Remember, God has a plan and a purpose for our lives today, but in order to be used by God, we must be separated from that which draws us away from Him and separated unto the Lord Himself. The cost is worth it. Gideon's heated God. I don't know what I had a typo. Oh, that's why you should go over your notes like more than you usually do. But he listened to God's unreasonable commands and won the victory. And after victory, as a result, he won this, and God blessed him. So, I guess what I'm trying to say here is that we need to be an example in faith, whether that's building someone up, whether that's trusting God in what seems an unreasonable position. I can give you another example. I've been jobless for almost 8 months. Not a single bill has gone unpaid, including my tuition for school. That is something that I've struggled with, but I've continued to have faith every day. Like, people are like, aren't you like mad that you're on the job? I'm like, it is what it is. God will provide. When that job opens up, I'll get there. I keep trying, but I don't let it break my faith. So, the last example that we have from Paul is to be an example in purity. And the Greek word for purity is hagnia, which means purity and sinless of life. This one, to be an example in purity, we need to be an example in not only our thoughts and our actions, but as well as our sexual purity. the world today displays so many inappropriate images at us. I mean, it tells us what your boyfriend should look like. It tells you what your girlfriend should look like. It tells us how to dress. It tells us that sex doesn't matter. Just have it. It's okay. It encourages people at such a young age to do so many things that are so harmful and degrading to themselves. And we need to be an example of what it means to actually live a sexually pure life and a pure life when it comes to anything we do. So as one believer to another, we need an example. We can do this by not joking around inappropriately, even if it's with our friends. And I've noticed, guys, we do this a lot. I don't know about girls, because I don't hang out with the girls and they talk about inappropriate stuff. But guys, like, we'll joke around. And I've even noticed, like, even at Bible college, like, some of the jokes we say, I'm like, that's not appropriate. Like, we should really stop that. And I've started, like, personally, I've been getting convicted about that. When people say jokes, I'm like, dude, we really shouldn't say that. Like, stop. Like, we're going to school to be pastors. Like, you need to stop making jokes like that. It's just not appropriate or edifying. And sometimes they get a weird look, and other times they're like, yeah, dude, you're right. And again, we see God's word tells us about a young man. Oh, man, I love this Bible character. Joseph, he is such an amazing guy, and there's so many sermons I feel we could do on him. Like, write on him, preach on him, teach on him. I feel like he's an amazing man of God. And Joseph, first off, his brothers ditched him and sold him into slavery, and then told his dad that he died. Like, that just sucks. And so he goes into slavery, and he's in his master's house, and the master's wife tries to seduce him. And he's like, yeah, no, you're crazy, like, I'm out. But she's persistent about it. She won't leave him alone. She approaches him, I think, like 3 or 4 times, and finally when he says no, she grabs his garment, and as he runs, tears it off and says, this man tried to sleep with me. Now he gets thrown in prison. His responses, though, while he was being attempted to be seduced by his master's wife, he said, how then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? See, Joseph realized that to commit fornication was a great wickedness and a sin against God. We must be like Joseph and do right, what is right for the right reasons. We must flee from immorality and refuse to use our bodies as instruments to the sinful nature. Now, we've gone over what it means to be examples in certain areas, and to end this off, I've had a couple key people in my life for the last, 15 years that I've known. Even before I was a believer, when I was partying, drinking, smoking cigarettes, smoking pot, just like being wild and doing what society says to do, I had friends that were examples of this, no matter what. Now, one of my friends, he is a big part of why I'm here today. He didn't agree with my lifestyle, and even though I decided to get deep into this lifestyle that he didn't agree with, he never left my side. He created safe boundaries, but yet was still there for me. I just remember a couple times I was in an apartment situation, and it just was not edifying. It was not good. My roommate started doing some hard drugs right as we moved in together. Excuse me. And I was done. I was over it. I was paying the rent. And one day, he just calls me and he's like, hey, dude, I've been seeing your Facebook posts. I know everything's hard right now. He goes, but honestly, he's like, it can only get better. It's only going to get better. Keep doing what you're doing. Try to find something out. Keep trying to change your lifestyle. It's only going to get better from here. It's not going to get harder. I know you're not going to like the statement, but I'll keep praying for you. And that's just one situation. I mean, he always used words to edify me. Always used words to lift me up. He never put me down in situations. He never lost faith that I would turn my life around. The second person I consider like a sister. And in high school, she is and even now in her life, she is in my mind, she's one of the best examples I've ever seen live out of what it means by this. I mean, she never used bad language. Yeah, she slipped up every now and then. Yeah, she used some inappropriate words. Yeah, she experimented with drinking. But we're all humans. We make mistakes. But aside from the little backsliding slides that she had, She's always been an example of what it's like to be a believer. And even when I was so stubborn, be like, no, I'm not going to church with you. No, I don't want to go to church. No, no, no. So she said, okay, I'm going to try something different. Her and her church friends would come and visit me every Wednesday at my work. Every Wednesday. And just show what it's like to be a believer. When I was busy, overwhelmed with like 10 tables that came in all within 2 minutes, they'd be like, dude, take your time. No hurry. We'll wait on you. Like, they were just so kind and compassionate and loving, and their words were always so nice. And so eventually I started going like to Six Flags with them, go to Knott's Berry Farm with them, go to Disneyland, go to the beach, whatever. And because of the examples these people lived, I became more and more curious about church. I found myself asking myself, okay, so is there really a God, and why do these people live out the lives they do? What influences them? Where are they getting this character from? Where are they getting their nature from? Like, how are they living like this in the world we live in? Like, I get angry all the time. I'm just frustrated with people all the time. Like, I'm not happy. And because of them and a few key other influential people in my life, I finally took the courage. And I mean, I had persistent people. Like, I was that guy where you had to ask me for like 6 months straight before I stepped through the 2 walls and stepped into a church. I just didn't want any of it. Don't know why. That's just how I was. Part of my upbringing, my mom never forced that on me. Her attitude was, let them make the decision. Let my kids decide. And it's funny how that works out. You have one Bible college to be a preacher, another one atheist. So mom was like, hey, I got both ends of the spectrum. So that's a fun environment to be in. But because of these people and their encouragement when I was at my lowest of lows, I came to church and allowed myself to open my heart to God. So when we are living our daily lives, we need to let our lives be an example that illustrates the power of the gospel to impact not only our words, but our conduct, our love, our faith, and our purity. If I could have the worship team come up, please. We're going to just take a time to respond and a moment of response. And if there's any areas that God's tugging on your heart, I would just encourage you to give that to the Lord and ask Him for ways where you can improve in these areas. For me, He gave me situations that, weren't that easy, and I'm still learning. But I just desire that we'd all just be better examples and learn how to just improve and how we're examples to other believers and just be set apart. Bring people into the kingdom because of how we live our lives and be able to edify and be good examples to kids. I mean, sometimes they don't realize it, but junior hires and even elementary kids look up to us so much because we're not their family, we're not their brother, we're not a sibling, we're somewhere else. And if we are just doing things that aren't good examples, they're going to imitate that action. So being a godly example is so, so important. And I'm just going to let Sean lead us in a time of response. And I would just encourage you to give your needs to Jesus. Give your wants to Jesus. Give your desires to Jesus. Ask Him how you can be a better example to someone in your life right now that you might have been a bad example to. And for me personally, I can't do that anymore because my roommate unfortunately got kicked out of school this week. So I can't speak into his life anymore. And that's not fun in my mind. That hurts. I lost a great opportunity to speak into someone's life. So as Sean leads us, I would just ask that you guys if the Lord spoke to you about something and inputted something in your heart, just talk to Him about it right now. He'll tell you what to do. Hey, it didn't. Hey, Andre, it didn't stop.
It didn't stop?
No, it's at 103 minutes.
Are you going to edit it?
I don't know how to.